So at the end of our last exciting installment, not even 10 minutes, we were talking about how the here in the screen, as you can see, we were talking about Mars in Gemini in the U.S. birth chart and how its aggression and its intense square aspect to Neptune, which I referred to as using our imagination in health. And I'm relating all this to vaccines, the country's involvement with vaccines currently, and healthcare for the nation. And the thing that's scary about this is that Mars really does refer in a national chart to its police force and its army. And in our case, it's the Pentagon, the Department of, quote, Defense, which is really the Department of War, as we all know. So this Mars square Neptune in the U.S. birth chart creates an immediate connection between the military and health, because Neptune is in Virgo, the sign of health, and between the military and the Supreme Court, or between the police and the Supreme Court, because the ninth house is the Supreme Court and the law of the land. But most of all, it's the government's publications that can be propaganda, ninth house. So we know the Pentagon told us right after 9/11 that it wanted a big budget and was going to start a new program, which was open propaganda, both toward us, the citizens, and to the rest of the world, to pursue its agenda. All right, so we have a nation in which war, Mars, and imagination, Neptune, are in conflict or tension. And so that means that the tendency is for the imagination and love and trust, faith of Neptune easily degenerates under that pressure from Mars, the military aggression force. It easily degenerates into not only propaganda, but overt lying and mystification and confusion, which is accelerated or exacerbated by the fact that Neptune really is a dreamy kind of energy and prefers to connect one thing to everything else. It's a feeling of connectedness. When you try to express that kind of energy in a sign like Virgo, which deals on a mental level with careful distinctions and separation of one thing from another, then you have a tendency, especially in the ninth house law courts and legislation of the United States, to create very confusing, obfuscated, foggy, misty, unclear words and languages with a lot of detail, but it seems to go round and round in circles, and as anyone trying to fill out a tax form knows. I mean, this is the kind of thing that the U.S. government is prone to. Obfuscation in communication, masking Neptune, aggression, Mars. And both these qualities that we looked at, the Mars in the U.S. birth chart in Gemini, the house of enemies or friends, squaring tensely the Neptune in the house of legislation and the law courts and so forth, and health, Virgo. Both these planets really come down in a golden line, if you will, or an energy flow to the lunar south node of the United States, which refers to the default mode of behavior of the citizens of the country, the masses, which are represented themselves by the literal moon, not the moon's nodes, but that literal moon is at 27 degrees of Aquarius in the same second house of money and values as the south lunar node is. Now, what I'm saying is that Mars and Neptune in that chart both put pressure on the south lunar node. What this means is that America's idealism, its Aquarian idealism of democracy and, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, etc., that the foundation of that, the default mode of it, the south node part of America is its inheritance from Europe, the European settlers who, killed the Indians and took over the country, us. That we came with an agenda, an idealistic agenda of essentially escaping prosecution, Mars, of our religious, ninth house is also religion, and belief systems. And we have, as a nation, Neptune in that house. So you see the pilgrims fleeing prosecution from England. You see all the religious people who fled so they could be eccentrically religious or create their own form of it. All that's involved. But so is a confusion about the general European heritage of what is a utopian society or a free society where all men are created equal. There was some masked aggression behind that. It was more of a propaganda stance than a reality. That language about the founding of America. It masks the real motives. And that process continues in America and is now coming up for serious examination because it's being turned against us. Naturally, it's time, karmically, or in the cycle of things. Astrology deals with cycles, and the nation's Mars, for the first time in its history, 2 years ago, turned into retrograde motion, meaning our aggression Mars is turned backwards for review, and really upon us, because Mars rules the sign Aries. And if you look at the chart of America, you can see that Aries, this red patch down here, the ram, Aries controls both the 4th house of the chart and the 5th. The 4th house is the land base of America, the red man, red Aries, you see Mars rule, and the 5th house, the nation's style of creative self-expression. Well, so Aries is spontaneous assertion, childlike, youthful sort of energeticness, and it's also war. So we look at that and go, okay, if Mars is turned retrograde in the progressed U.S. chart, meaning the country's integral spiritual unfoldment reached a point 2 years ago where the entire aggression Mars impulse in the country, largely expressed through Gemini language and words and propaganda, is turned backward. Everybody in the country has to look at their language. We turn on the radio, turn on the TV, we hear all these propagandas from the right, from the left, arguing, screaming in a very, very, distasteful way that's aggressive, overbearing, and confuses the issues. That's what's going on. The healthcare bills and the H1N1 flu epidemic are part of that problem. So we have to look at, well, why should they now be coming, aside from the Mars turning retrograde, what other factors in America's psyche would indicate something like that might be going on astrologically? And it's right here. I've drawn this chart, which is for December 17th of 2009. It's actually the birth chart of America in the white circle inside here. In the gold or yellow circle, we have the progressions, the progressed chart of America. And out here we have the actual movements in the blue circle of the planets in the sky. As you can see, 3 planets are conjoining each other, 22, 23, and 24 degrees of Aquarius. And those planets are Chiron, Jupiter, and Neptune. That's a massing of planets. And that Chiron and Jupiter and Neptune are all very close to the U.S. progressed Mercury, the country's progressed mind and style of communication and thinking. You see, Mercury, which is in Aquarius at this point, and along with the nation's natal moon and its south node. So what we have is Neptune is forming, along with Jupiter and Chiron, but primarily Neptune is forming this quincunx. I've drawn in this lavender thing to show that the United States mind, Mercury, is in Cancer at 24 degrees at its birth, in a sextile green line relationship to that Neptune we had looked at in the big chart. And both those planets are quincunx the U.S. progressed Mercury at this point. This is a very, on March the 1st of 2010, the progressed U.S. Mercury exactly forms by minute and second a quincunx to its natal Neptune, meaning we really have to start looking at glamour, confusion, mystification, particularly from our military, but from our press, the propaganda machine in the country, because there is the possibility, the very great likelihood, that there is some form of violence and aggression turned against the people of the United States by its own government's propaganda, and leading to victimization of all Americans, our losing our rights, and possibly our health being undermined, not to mention the collapsing of the entire economy. So that's probably where we have to stop this little vignette, and we'll try taking up part 3. I can't believe these 10-minute